On this episode of Pique, the Dyatlov Pass Incident, Part 2. In this video, we'll be reviewing the evidence of the Dyatlov Pass incident while discussing the many theories people have put forth about what may have caused this tragedy. Theory number 1. A Russian Yeti killed them. Among the belongings retrieved from the campsite was a small newspaper about the trip that the hikers had made for fun. It was called the Evening Otorten, and included this text. From now on, we know that the snowmen exist. They can be met in the northern Urals, next to Otorten Mountain. Though it's likely that the hikers were jokingly referring to themselves, many people believe this to be evidence that the team may have spotted an abominable snowman of some sort, which later terrorized the camp and bashed up 3 members of the party. Supporters of this theory believe that the injuries on the hands of the 2 men found beneath the cedar tree, Doroshenko and Krivonashenko, weren't burns, but severe scrapes that occurred when they tried to climb the cedar tree to escape the alleged Yeti. A forensic examination of the tree bark was said to have found remnants of human skin, though that statement seems dubious considering the state of forensic science in the 1950s. However, it is plausible with any of the scenarios, considering that the team members did attempt to climb the tree, hence the broken branches. Now, whether it was to get away from a rampaging snow monster, or simply to get to a higher point to see the camp, is the real question. Theory 2. Aliens. You know there was going to be an aliens theory. There's always an aliens theory. Supporters of the alien theory cite 3 pieces of evidence. 1. A report made by another group of hikers who had allegedly been camped 30 miles south of the pass. The hikers claimed to have seen unusual orange spheres in the sky in the direction of the pass on the night of the incident. Other independent witnesses in Ivdal and surrounding areas also observed the spheres in a period from February to March. Witnesses included members of the Meteorology Service and the Soviet military. 2. A man named Yuri Kuntsevich, who, as a 12-year-old boy, had attended 5 of the hikers' funerals, publicly recalled that their skin had a deep brown or orangish tone. Supporters of the alien theory cite this as proof of exposure to an alien ray, or radiation. And speaking of radiation, physicians examining the hikers' remains reported that 2 of the bodies, Ludmila Dobanina and Alexander Zolotarev, exhibited radiation. Some materials discussing the Dyatlov incident list the levels of radiation as high, but this is contradicted by the case information. It was concluded that the radiation on the bodies was trace and was likely caused by the bodies being stored near an unknown source of radiation at the Ural Institute. Theory 3. Soviet military cover-up. Proponents of this theory believe that the Soviet military had been using the mountain pass as a weapons testing site. They allege that the weapons being tested were concussive and potentially also chemical. Some theorists specifically name the parachute mine as the weapon being tested. They cite the following evidence to support their theory. 1. The blast of a weapon would have greatly alarmed the camped hikers and caused them to desperately cut open their tent and flee, leaving their clothes and gear behind. 2. Concussive blasts could have caused the severe rib and skull fractures of some of the victims if they were close enough to the device. 3. Some later visitors to the area claim to have seen pieces of metal near the site. 4. The glowing orbs mentioned earlier in the alien theory could have been detonating devices. 5. The orange tinge of the victim's skin, mentioned by funeral attendees, might have been the result of exposure to chemicals released by the device. And 6. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of this theory. It has the support of the sole survivor of the Dyatlov Pass group, Yuri Yudin, the man who left the group and turned back to Vizhay, having come down with dysentery. Yudin said that he had always felt that the Soviet military had been responsible in some way. In one of his last interviews, he recalled being asked to match items found at the scene with the group member they belonged to. Yudin stated that he'd been unable to find a match for 4 items: a pair of glasses, a pair of skis, a part of a ski, and a scrap of cloth that appeared to be military in origin. These items made him suspect that government officials or military personnel had found the tent and the victims before the rescuers. Yudin also noted that the authorities were less interested in determining how the hiking party died than they were about why the party had been in the area in the first place. The authorities made a ruling on the deaths after a brief investigation and then kept the case file and all evidence in a classified status for over 50 years. To Yudin, this showed their complicity. Theory 4. Attacked by Mansi natives. The Mansi are an indigenous people who live in northwestern Siberia. Because of their familiarity with the area in which the incident occurred, many people speculated that men from a Mansi tribe must have attacked and killed the group. The Mansi did know the area well. Otorten was a Mansi word meaning "don't go there." The Mansi had also named the very peak where the hikers made their final camp, calling it Kholat Sayakal. This name translates to Dead Mountain. Creepy, isn't it? Not quite so creepy when you learn the context. The Mansi used the same word for meager, and used the name in a hunting context that means lack of game for hunters. But what if the Mansi were on the mountain, hunting people instead of game? It's possible, but let's look at the evidence. 1. Supporters of this theory claim that the Mansi attackers cut the tent from the outside and forced the inhabitants out into the freezing night. However, fabric experts examined the tent and stated that the knife cuts came from the inside. Were the experts mistaken? Possibly. 2. Investigators reported only seeing footprints belonging to the 9 hikers, not an additional band of marauders. But could snow and wind have covered up evidence of other people? Remember, 22 days had passed between the incident and the first discovery of bodies. Maybe. 3. The Mansi weren't known for attacking hikers and campers. There wasn't a lot of strife between the Russian people and the Mansi. Furthermore, none of the hikers' belongings were taken, so the purpose of the attack wasn't robbery. 4. The Russian authorities were quick to dismiss the Mansi attack theory. Some theorists take this as evidence that the Russian authorities were trying to curry favor with the Mansi, as they had just begun to exploit the rich oil reserves of the Khanty-Mansi region. Theory 5. Murder-suicide. Some theorists have posited that members of the group must have gotten into a fight, or that one member of the group had become enraged and attacked other members, sending them all fleeing out of the tent into the cold night and injuring some members mortally. However, like the Mansi attack theory, there is no scientific or anecdotal evidence supporting this theory. Diaries and film found at the campsite show that the party members were friendly and supportive of one another. There were no signs of tension or conflict. Could a member of the party have become intoxicated and suddenly become violent? Possibly, but there was no evidence of drug use at the campsite or on the bodies. The only bottle of alcohol retrieved from the site was a small bottle of medicinal alcohol, and it was still full. Furthermore, the injuries sustained by the victims do not jive with this theory. If a member of the party had attacked the rest, he would likely have suffered injuries consistent with aggressors, such as broken bones in the hand and arm, cuts to the knuckles, scratches, or bruises from physical contact with the other members. The only hand injuries sustained by party members were the burns, abrasions on Krivonashenko and Doroshenko. Also, the rib and skull fractures suffered by Thibaut Bernioli, Dubinina, and Zolotarev are more consistent with a traumatic fall than from a fight. Theory 6. An avalanche, or a presumed avalanche. This is the theory I find most plausible given these facts. Number 1. Where the group chose to set up their final campsite was surprising to experts. Rather than moving to a nearby forested area that would have offered more protection, Dyatlov chose the exposed slope, a position with much greater avalanche risk. Yuri Yudin, the only surviving member of the group, was questioned about Dyatlov's decision, which was puzzling given his level of experience. Yudin guessed that Dyatlov had either not wanted to lose the altitude they had gained, or he had wanted the group to gain the experience of camping on a slope. So, the group chose to camp on an exposed slope, knowing the risks. This likely would have made them more paranoid than usual about the threat of an avalanche. Presumably, they'd be a lot more wary of the sounds and vibrations of the snowpack and the wind blowing around them as they bedded down for the night. It wouldn't even require an actual avalanche, just the indication of one, to terrify hikers who were already worried and cause them to flee. It's important to note that in photos of the camp discovery, the tent is only partially covered with snow, and rescuers were able to find footprints of the Dyatlov group. So a full-scale avalanche had likely not occurred. It's possible that a smaller patch of snow had shifted and hit the tent, alarming the hikers. or even that sounds were heard indicating an avalanche that never came, but sent them running from the tent anyway. 2. When the team exits the tent, they leave behind life or death survival gear. Does the leaving behind of essential clothing and gear indicate that the alternative was certain death, which is usually the case with hikers and avalanches? Possibly. 3. At a safe distance, but with minimal clothing and no gear, the group was now thoroughly exposed to the elements. Temperatures were estimated to be between -13 and -22 degrees Fahrenheit, and a storm was blowing. With hypothermia looming at just 15 minutes of this kind of exposure, the experienced group knew they had to act. Number 4. Tracks found by search parties indicate that the group scattered at first, but came back together approximately 900 feet away, under the tree discussed earlier. Here a fire is started. Broken branches suggest that someone tried to climb the tree, presumably to look back at the tent or to spot other members of the team. Number 5. Search parties find Krivonischenko and Doroshenko dead of hypothermia near the tree. Dyatlov, Kolmogorova, and Slobodin succumbed to hypothermia between the tree and the tent, indicating that they were trying to make it back to the tent, presumably in a last-ditch effort to retrieve life-saving clothes and supplies. Number 6. When the search party finds the 4 remaining hikers in the ravine, they discover that Dubinina is wearing Krivonischenko's pants as shoes, and Zolotarev is wearing Dubinina's hat and coat, and that they have been cut or torn off of their owners. This is an indication of the order in which the members died, taking clothing from their companions who no longer had a need for them. The scenario appears to be more of a people slowly dying one by one of hypothermia scenario, rather than a raging maniac killing people scenario or an alien spacecraft scenario. Number 7. The last 4 hikers were found in a ravine. The depth of the ravine is not stated, but appears to be somewhat shallow in photographs, as seen here. 3 of the 4 hikers, Dubinina, Zolotarev, and Thibaut Brignoli, suffered fractures that, according to their post-mortem examinations, caused their deaths. Though the ravine is fairly shallow, it's plausible to me that the 3 sustained their injuries by falling into the ravine while trying to reach the cover of the tree line. What's a little more curious is why Kolevatov, who was also found in the ravine, did not suffer any fractures and died from hypothermia. Perhaps he was lucky and fell into a softer area. Or did the bodies of his friends cushion his fall? If the 4 were huddled together for warmth, moving slowly, perhaps Dubinina and Thibaut Brignoli, who experienced the worst of the fractures, fell first, and Zolotarev and Kolevatov fell on top of them, doubling the force of their injuries. It's possible. Some theorists do not believe that the depth of the ravine was great enough to cause such grievous injuries. They cite the physician who referred to the injuries as being consistent with a car crash. It is certainly debatable, and I'm not a pathologist, so I couldn't say with any certainty, but I'm fairly certain that it was the ravine, and not raging Mansi or a Yeti that caused their deaths. Number 8. An animal probably did have a go at one of the hikers, but it likely wasn't a Yeti. When the search team found Ludmila Dubinina, they discovered that her eyes, tongue, and lips were missing, along with a patch of facial tissue and skull bone. According to forensic experts, these soft, moist parts of the body are often the first parts to be taken by scavengers, if a body is left exposed to the elements. Eyewitnesses have also stated that Dubinina was discovered face down in a tiny stream. It's possible that the presence of slightly warmer, running water on her face caused decomposition in her face and hands. Given the evidence, I believe that the avalanche, or presumed avalanche theory, is the most logical, rational explanation for what happened to the Dyatlov team. And no, a KGB agent is not forcing me to say that right now. I encourage everyone to review the evidence in this case and make your own determinations. There are still so many unanswered questions. Something we do know, however, is that the Dyatlov team was made up of some remarkable people. Though history knows them as victims of a horrifying ordeal, we'll close this video by celebrating who they were and what they accomplished in their short lives. Igor Dyatlov. Friends described Igor as friendly, thoughtful, and deliberate. At the time of the hike, he was a student of engineering and was proving to be a talented engineer. He designed and built a radio and a small stove, which he took on hiking trips with him. The area where the team died is now referred to as the Dyatlov Pass in his honor. Yuri Doroshenko. Yuri was an exceptional student and won awards for his scholarship. Like most of his fellow hikers, he attended Ural Polytechnic Institute. He was an experienced hiker and had led many of his own expeditions into the Middle Urals. Lyudmila Dobanina. Lyudmila was a kind, adventurous person. She enjoyed photography and even took many of the photos found at the final camp. She had also been on several trips and in one sustained a gunshot wound thanks to a careless hiker cleaning his rifle. Although her wound was painful, she remained stoic during her transport back home and even apologized to the group for disrupting the trip. She attended Ural Polytechnic and majored in both economics and engineering. Alexander Kolevatov. Alexander was driven and studious. Before attending Ural Polytechnic, Alexander had earned himself a degree in metallurgy at a mining college and had moved to Moscow to work in both the confidential Ministry of Medium Machine Building and the Research Institute of Inorganic Materials. Both organizations were part of the Soviet nuclear industry. Zenaida Kolmogorova. Zenaida, often called Zena, was very outgoing and bubbly. She was well liked at the university and was said to have always been full of ideas and kind words for everyone. Like Dyatlov, she was a radio engineering major and was close to completing her degree. She had a great deal of hiking experience. On one trip, she was bitten by a snake, and though she was in pain, she refused to remove her pack lest she burden a teammate with extra weight. Yuri Krivonishenko. Yuri graduated from Ural Polytechnic in 1959 with a degree in engineering. While in college, he worked at a secret nuclear facility. The plant experienced a catastrophic leak, and it was said that Yuri was part of the team sent in to address the damages. Rustem Slobodin. Rustem was very athletic and outdoorsy. He was remembered by his friends as being very honest and generous. Although he was a quiet person, he liked to play the mandolin and always brought it along on long hiking trips. He graduated from Ural Polytechnic in 1959. Nikolai the Bow Bernoulli. Before departing for the Dyatlov trip, Nikolai promised his mother that this would be his last expedition. From birth he endured misfortune, having been born in a political concentration camp. His French father was executed for his political views when Nikolai was a teenager. His early hardships made him incredibly compassionate and caring. On hiking trips, he looked out for everyone, especially the younger and more inexperienced hikers, and would give them advice and fix their gear to make it more comfortable. Friends described him as funny, energetic, and faithful. He graduated from Ural Polytechnic in 1958 with a degree in civil engineering. Alexander Zolotarev. The oldest member of the Dyatlov group, Alexander was of Cossack heritage. He served the Soviet Union in World War II in what was known to Soviets as the Great Patriotic War. He earned 4 medals for his service, a rare designation for Cossacks, who the Soviet leadership felt were too politically volatile. For more information on the Dyatlov Pass incident, view the sources below. Thanks for watching Pique. If I piqued your interest, kindly give this video a thumbs up. Or subscribe to this channel to further cure your curiosity.